Metagenix is proudly enhancing the health of our benefactors. Metroplex Zero. Discover the dark truth and fight for a better world. Join in an epic quest against corrupt megacorps. Customize your deck with powerful cards. Upgrade your hero with cybernetic augmentations. Every strategy feels dramatically different. Journey from rebel to legend. Subvert the system. Root out corporate corruption. Metroplex Zero.
So yeah, before we go and start talking about the game itself, who are you guys?
Yeah, fantastic. So we're a small, tiny, little, mostly two-ish man studio with a whole bunch of other collaborators and talented folks we work with. We've been developing games for about 5 years. We've made over 20.
Oh, wow.
One of the things we love to do is we're often doing game jams where we'll build a whole game from scratch in 3 days or 1 week. And that's always just a fantastic journey. You get to test your skills. You get to try out some new cool ideas. This is one of our big projects. We've done 2 big commercial projects, and this is our second one. And with this, we're trying to build this, this massive, highly replayable, deep game with a rich world that has got lots of fun stuff to explore, and hopefully is an experience that sticks with people a long time. We've been longtime game players, and now we're game developers, and it's an exciting part of that journey to share some of our love for gaming with our kids and friends and the rest of the world.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know. How about you? What's your background?
I have the same background inside of within making games. We just started with our first project. We started not knowing what we were getting into with game development. Turns out it's a lot harder than you might think compared to corporate development. But then once after that, we did a bunch of game jams and made smaller games that were fun to make and so forth. And then we learned a lot of things during that. So yeah. Making commercial games is pretty different though too. But otherwise, then I've eaten, drink programming. I swear, and then when I'm not playing video games, it's board games. So
yeah, board games are I have a big weekend coming up here, this weekend with a friend of mine who's celebrating his birthday, and we're just gonna go to his family summer house and just play board games the entire weekend. It's gonna be great. So,
that sounds wonderful.
I know, perfect weekend.
Yeah, it's and then we're gonna drop off the kids with my in-laws, and we're just gonna have a weekend of board games. It's gonna be great. But yeah, so do any of you guys have a family and kids?
Yeah, I've got 2 kids right now, and the third one coming in January. They're small and they're just excited about the world. It's so fun to watch. They're learning new things every single day. It's amazing.
You got your hands full then.
Yep, and then I got 10 younger siblings. One of them being Noah.
Oh wow!
But
yeah, so you're siblings then, brothers.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah, I don't know actually how Silas fits in all the things he does. The fact that he will jam out for these long stints of time or so forth, and somehow he still's trying to run a family. I am enjoying the single free life where I get to do whatever I want because I don't have a family. But it's pretty good. It means I get to develop a lot.
Yeah, and a lot of time for gaming as well. I guess.
Yep.
Because obviously I also have 2 kids, and I can find finding that balance. And I to be honest, as you say, Noah, I'm really curious, Silas, how do you manage to balance it? I have trouble balancing doing the occasional content creation, parenting, gaming, work, and life in general, chores, paying the. I got to sit down and pay the bills after this. So how do you do it?
So I guess 2 of the thoughts I have is, number 1, you got to partition your time very specifically. You got to know what's allocated. When am I hanging out with my family? When am I doing corporate work? When am I doing game dev? You've got to have that clearly sliced out. If you don't protect the time for the activities, they won't happen, whichever they are. So that's the number 1 thing. And number 2 is just prioritize. Pick the things that you care about the most. And for everything that's not a priority, feel free to say no to. Even if it's something good, like hanging out with friends or or you have to say no to the things that would pull you away from your most important priorities, whatever they are.
Yeah, that's wise words. Would be nice if they were easier to follow.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Isn't that how all wise words are?
Yeah, I suppose they are. But yeah, so Metroplex Zero, like how long ago did you start building it? Like how long has this thing been in development?
When was
It's
it?
almost 3 years when I started this project. It was this little idea in my brain. And I was thinking, hey, maybe I'll try to outsource most of this. So I was looking into, can somebody on Fiverr build me a prototype, and then I can, as a designer, kind of build it into a thing. And that didn't go very far. I hired somebody, and they were going to build the whole first small slice prototype in about 2 months. And I think 6 weeks in, they didn't have a demo yet. And he messaged me. He's like, hey, I've had some family stuff. Like, this is going to take a little longer. Can I have a couple-week extension? I'm like, sure, that sounds great. And then another week later, he's like, things are still going a little slow. Can I have another extension? I'm like, okay. And then the time kind of came in and went, and he's like, I didn't get anything built. I'm going to have to refund your order. I'm like, oh, great. Okay. So I guess we're back to square zero.
Yeah. Did you explore the idea at all in one of the game jams you mentioned, or was it something that came outside of the game jam?
So this one's harder to do. What's easy to do in a game jam is you got some tight single concept idea. It's very easy to do in a game jam. If you've got like 2 or 3 systems in mind, that doesn't fit well in a game jam. So game jams are perfect for very action-oriented games, or games that you have like one core mechanic. Like if you got a puzzle with 1 or 2 mechanics that you can evolve in some levels, that works really well. If you've got a short story to share, those work really well. But if you've got a system-heavy game, a math-heavy game, that's very complicated. And if you have more than 1 or 2 key systems in play, you can't fit that in a game jam very well anymore, unless it's a known quantity, unless you're doing something non-innovative. And this one was kind of a blend. I had the idea of, I just played Hand of Gilgamesh, and I've played a lot of card games, both from physical card games, Magic the Gathering, WoW TCG back in the day, and digital card games, including like stuff, Slay the Spire, Hearthstone. So I had this idea. I really liked the idea of combining an RPG with a collectible card game where you get to customize your deck, get more cards as you're going. And so my thought is, what if you got something that combines those two? You've got a card-based, party-based RPG. And I noticed in Slay the Spire, like you get that, but you only have 1 character. And that doesn't get you the combinatorials that a great session of D&D is really fun for 2 reasons. Number 1, because of the people you're playing with, you can kind of ham it up and make it really fun. But number 2, every group you're playing with, your players have different play styles. And so if you've got 2 rogues and a cleric and a mage, you're going to have a totally different combat experience than if you walk in with your, more traditional like tank, healer, support kind of flow. Like every party composition yields a totally different way you play with the world. And so I liked that idea. I was like, how could we get some of that? And I liked Hand of Gilgamesh, but I thought it didn't lean hard enough into, you can't really customize your party very much. You start with just 2 characters in your party, and you eventually get, I believe it is 5.
Yeah, and then you can only have
6.
4. Is it 3 or 4 you can have at the same time?
You can have 3 at the same time,
yeah.
But they didn't necessarily have as much like strong diversity, and you didn't unlock some of them until much later when you kind of already built your play style. And so the late game characters, they didn't feel like you could kind of build your concept around them up front. So I was like, what if we had in my mind, we could have like 20 different characters in the game. Right now, Metroplex Zero has 9, but in my mind, what if you had 20? And the number of combinatorials of parties, you're going to have so many different gameplay styles. So connecting that with the idea of a customizable card game where you're collecting and you're tweaking your decks, and your deck will be different based on your foes and your party members, that seemed so exciting to me. So that was kind of the germ that I'm like, I have to try this, and it can't be in a game jam because we won't really get the taste of it.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, when I did my first look earlier this week, and I was really blown away with how much I liked it. I mean, just a few weeks ago, I made a video about Roguebook and saying how that was my favorite card game, like deck building game to date. in a lot of ways, not counting collectible card games like Magic the Gathering, of course. But I really like, and I think the thing that really struck out to me was the whole thing where you have your characters and you have your decks. You can only ever bring 12 cards for each character into the battle, and that really, like, to me, that really reminded me of what I like about the favorite game of all time for me, which is Guild Wars 1. So like,
Nice.
I mean, Guild Wars 1, what I really liked about that, I mean, we have your up to part of 8 characters. You have 8 skills each. There's like 1,000 different skill combinations to choose from. Like, it becomes quite like more about building the perfect party and the perfect setup for each encounter than anything else. So, obviously, like some of the influences that I like, obviously into the game was quite obvious, like the, as you mentioned, Slay the Spire. And all, like and collectible card games like Magic the Gathering, but also, like, was Guild Wars 1 one of the influences, and like what else influenced the gameplay?
I think it's funny at this point. The game you see now isn't the game that it always was. It has changed forms so many times because we're playing it and discover things that we kept on doing this thing where we'd have a problem and we'd come back and we'd be like, we wouldn't come up with a solution, so we go play other games and then be like, a mechanic from that game solved our problem. We should take that mechanic and use it. And so it's funny, at first we had, I want to say, kind of much less like things that we were pulling from and inspired by when we first started, but then it grew in like the place we were taking things from and like how they ran their systems or something we liked from one place or another, that the games that we've like been inspired by has been quite large now, I'd say, if you add them up over time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it kind of did diverge. Initially, we had a few core games that were directly inspired by it, but also we've been playing games for so many years. We've got all these game design ideas in our brains. Sometimes you don't even consciously place that, oh, this is from that game. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Like, you'll notice in the tutorial story, you fought against Gilgamesh.
Yeah. And
so that's a strong reference, especially from Final Fantasy, where you keep fighting the same boss again and again.
Yeah, and also the name from the Hand of Gilgamesh, as you mentioned before. Maybe that's
although
it's Gilgamesh in that one.
Definitely inspired by Final Fantasy for my design there.
But I mean, it works great as a way to introduce all the mechanics as well. I gotta say, like, I mean, it's a lengthy tutorial, but it's also a tutorial that really sets you up for success, I felt.
I'm really glad you think so. The tutorial has been built more times than any feature in
I
the entire application.
I can imagine. And I mean,
so hard to get to understand the game, but not bore people or have them skip through it or whatever it is. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's true. One of those. Oh, go ahead.
That one's by far the toughest. We've had a lot of things we've reworked. Like, we've revamped the map, the travel system. We reworked the battle system. We've reworked so many things so many times. I think the highest level thing we have is map is on its version 5. So we reworked it 4 times total. But the tutorial is on version 6. Yep. We've reworked the tutorial more than anything else. And we didn't even start with that. But it's been... We kept having, feedback. Some people will say, oh, I love the game, but I didn't really know what was going on. And then some people are like, I read all this text and I didn't really know what it said. I'm like, but you just read it, but I don't really know what it means. Like, they'll make the same mistake right after reading it. So we had to, that one was definitely the hardest part of this whole game.
I think people. Yeah, I think you're I mean, the tutorial is, while it's long, it keeps you engaged while you play it, because it is its own storyline. It is its own. And there's like several bite-sized challenges in between, but what really nails it down for me is like the learn by doing. You experience, not only do you learn it by doing it yourself, but also the game, your opponent does the same thing to you, and you have to like see how it works against you as well. I think that really helps. And yeah, like I said, the tutorial was really good. Like, really set me up for the rest of the game. But like when you build a tutorial like that, do you Like how easy do you find it to be? Like, do you build it in like because like when writing documentation from corporate things, it's a lot of the times you write it and then you read it and you understand it and then you hand it over to someone else who goes like, I have no idea what to do here. Like, how do you
Yep.
how do you tackle that problem? Like, like setting yourself in a mindset of I don't know anything about this is very hard. Like I remember seeing
Nigh impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing a challenge of like, or doing a challenge at a conference at one point where someone was like, "Yeah, so pretend like give me the instructions on how to make this sandwich." And like, you had some butter, they had a knife and some bread, and a plate. That was it. And then like, yeah, so you take the bread and then you put some butter in. So we took the full packet of bread, put it on the plate, and then just put the butter packet on top of that. Like, done. And then like, because like going so, like how did you approach that even for such a complex thing?
So we built a terrible tutorial originally, and then we watched people play it, and it was disastrous. No one knew what was happening in the first version, so we built a new one, and we watched different people play it. We kept on getting different people to try it out to see, and we'd like try to be like, okay, exactly where did it go wrong? I want to say it was funny with our first play group because there are a lot of like programmers. Our tutorial that worked there was like the one that it spelled things out while showing images of the various things, and that worked for programmers. They would see it and be like, oh, I get it, and then we'd be like, great, this is wonderful. And then as soon as it hit the player base that was directly not programmers, they skipped through all the dialogue. They didn't want to read any of it, and they didn't know what was happening in the game. And we were like, so then we went back to the drawing board, made an interactive one, and then that interactive one didn't do it well, and so then I started being like, okay, I need to design a railroad system where I make it so there's only the thing you need to do to learn the next mechanic, and then I'll break it up into chunks. And that's what formed this one, was that broken up into chunks. Like, I need you to learn just how to target and attack and play cards, so I'm gonna have that. And I also was like, people get distracted when there's too many elements on the screen. Like, definitely in the first tutorials, they would look at all the things and they'd be curious about all the things, look at the things, and wouldn't like, even if they did the action, they would immediately forget it because there's too many things on the screen. So I was like, okay, I'll build a custom UI things and hides everything except the only things that are new, and I will pop at them and I will do that. And I finally had a working version. But it's actually so funny. Once I had the version you see today close to it, we didn't have the text. It was only by do. I didn't tell you anything. And people would play it and get it and make it through the tutorial and think they didn't know the game because they never had text on the screen. So they'd play the game even though they got it. They would play it perfectly, but they would be like, I don't know what's happening at all. It was like a psychological thing. They hadn't gone through a tutorial that told them things, and so they thought they didn't get it, which was the funniest, in my opinion, the funniest one yet. And I said, what if I made panels that I know people will skip? I think it's crazy. Most people will skip the panels that show up at the start of each fight. Most players skip them. They only read them.
Even the players who read them, they don't realize that they're reading them. They'll like read it and then promptly forget it, but feel like they get it now. So it's a wild hack.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
And then after that, there was another thing. So I was noticing all this playtesting. Playtesting is the way we built the whole tutorial. One of the things we noticed is, now that we had this long tutorial, at first we just kick you to the main menu and you could just start your adventure. That's what we had even earlier this year. And then when we had this long railroad tutorial, the players would be about 20 minutes in the game and they'd be like, well, you know, the combat system's pretty good, but I hate the story. The story's just terrible. And I'm thinking to myself, and I mentioned this to Noah, and he's thinking to himself, there is no story. You have not gotten to the game yet. Wait until the game starts. But people were thinking this was the whole story. Like, they're like, this story is crap. And we're like, well, I guess players need a story. We're going to build this into a whole proper story with cutscenes and everything, because people are expecting you to have some reason for all this stuff and some people and some characters you care about. And after we did that, then people are like, okay, yeah, this is a pretty cool story. I get this. So we didn't even want to have to put story in the tutorial. We just wanted to teach mechanics, but people were complaining about the story that wasn't there, thinking it was a story.
So we invented a whole narrative, added cutscenes and so forth, all to excuse what I need you to kind of get.
Yeah, we added custom battlefields. We got our composer to make the own battle theme for that whole world. Like everything.
I did
We're like,
notice
well,
the music was different, which was like really, really cool.
yeah, so each environment's got its own theme. We got another custom music theme, which I think is Noah's very favorite battle theme. Is in the
good.
adventure that's not even in the game yet that we're working on.
The new adventure. I'm so excited for this adventure. It's so
nice.
Good.
Same. We're actually collaborating. We hired one of the best indie cyberpunk writers in the industry. She writes cyberpunk books. And so she wrote the script for our next adventure, not Organized Harvesters, but the one that's locked in the game. And we're currently writing it. It's got some really cool stuff. So I'm excited. Like the environments are cool. The storyline's crazy neat. The soundtrack is just kicking. I can't wait for people to play it.
Yeah, I gotta say, like the soundtrack was also one of those. Like I really like. Obviously, there's like two different styles, at least as far as I'm that I got, like two different styles in the soundtrack.
Right. There's two different artists, I think, behind it.
Yeah, but I mean, while it is two different styles, they work really well together. And I mean, I have this other show with another creator who we realize we both really like video game music, but we have so different taste in games that we likely haven't heard each other's music before. So we share songs, meet up every like once a month, and we share a song each, and get to discover new video music that we otherwise wouldn't have. And like, funny thing is, like because like just a few days before I played the game for the first time, I had just recorded one of those shows and showed him a song from a Swedish metal band that basically takes metal and chiptunes and blends it all together. And when I listened to the soundtrack on your game, I was like, oh, this is like, it's them, but you take it apart, so you have like two different parts of it. Like first you have the chiptunes, and then comes the metal part, and then back to like, it was really fun to see. Was that blend a conscious choice, or was it, as you say, two different artists doing two different things that both worked? Or
that's a great question. So I guess before I became a game developer, when I was in high school, I was super into video game music. And I guess the key reason is most popular music is very vocally oriented and very musically simple. And I was being a cerebral creature, I love music that has more depth. So I liked classical a bit, but some classical hasn't aged as well. So when I discovered video game music, film soundtracks, and progressive metal music. Those all kind of hit that same itch of like, here's some stuff that's really deep that you can sink your brain into and really enjoy the soundscape. I actually got into video game remixing and did that for a bunch of years coming out of high school and in early college years. So because of that, like I've listened to a ton of video game music. In fact, if you got stuff, I'd love it if you shared video game tracks.
Yeah, I'll drop them your way after this.
Kind of getting into how that flows into Metroplex Zero. I've got this. I don't know if it's good or bad, but I kind of wanted to have a big world of music that had some serious variety to it. Because sometimes you get a soundtrack that mostly is same-ish. Like Halo soundtrack is really good, and there's a couple standout tracks, but most of it kind of feels the same.
Yeah.
And you don't have like 5 tracks that are fantastic in their own way. And one of my thoughts, I love some of the earlier, more melodically oriented video game music, because that's the kind of thing it's the melodies that stick in your brain long after you're done playing that you remember. They both create that feeling in the game, but the music itself lives on when you're done playing the game. And so I wanted Metroplex Zero to have something like that. And yeah, we worked with 2 different composers. Most of the tracks that are currently in the game are from one of the composers, and he actually has a very broad range. He's fantastically talented. So I suppose some of he's able to actually write in a bunch of styles, and some of it is I wanted to kind of shape it towards having a big world where like each music track should be its own thing that sort of stands alone on its own merits and gets you your own feelings and your own thoughts. So you've got that NNZ feeling kind of with that chiptune, ish. It was inspired by Mega Man a little bit. And I specifically said we want like Mega Man, but with a little bit of a corporate vibe, but with some catchy melodies. So we did get that, like that.
Yeah,
he nailed it.
He nailed it. Yeah, I agree.
He nailed it, and I feel that fits that corporation really well. But then you get into when you're in your deck builder screen, your map screen, like you want something that's a little more moody and atmospheric, and not as in your face as when you're fighting. And then same thing, you get to some of those dark alley battles, you want something that's a little grittier and more modern. So
Yeah.
I've actually been excited. Like most of the ones you're hearing are one composer, and he's just got a great range and is able to capture different feeling and a different energy. And I don't know if it's good or bad, but that's what I wanted. I wanted to take
No,
people on a
I
musical
think it really
journey.
works. And as you say, like the whole, like obviously, like when because you're building your own world from scratch with this game, right? There's
That's
nothing.
correct.
Yeah. And when you do that, obviously you need to ground the world somehow. And like it's the same thing. Like one of the reasons why I think Cyberpunk 2077's world works so great. Like think what you will about the game, but the world building is quite solid. I think to me one of the things that really does that is the fact that the music in the game, and like they have so many genres of music, and all of it is completely written from scratch for the game. And I mean, obviously they have a massive budget to do that, but like I feel you managed to, at least so far in the game, for me, you really managed to grab that, like that same world, like the world building aspect of it. It's the same with a game like Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2. They managed to, like, they have several continents, and you can really hear different cultures within those. Obviously, here you have the different, maybe like different companies and the different areas of the game, of the map. But yeah, like obviously, like building a world through music is really cool. And I also got to say that like the art style in like the concept art in the loading screens. I kind of wished my loading times were longer at some points. Like really cool concept art in those.
So if you want to look at those, we actually added, if you go to the database tab from the main menu, there's a whole screen dedicated to the concept art. You can scroll through it at your own speed, exactly because some people wanted to like look at those in more detail. That one's actually kind of a fun discovery. So in my corporate job this last year, I worked in computer visuals research and development. And one of the things I stumbled across was the AI art tools.
Really
and so
blown up.
some of that concept art I created by using Midjourney to
Oh yeah,
kind of
Midjourney is cool. I played around with it until I ran out of credits, and I was like, oh, too bad. what now?
So I kind of there's a lot that goes into prompt engineering.
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
B, we already
hard.
had a visual style and language and colors for our corporations. So I was curious, like, what happens if I feed it that? What kind of things can we get that sort of get you that feeling of the world without us having to pay $3,000 a pop for those high level, like if those were paid by a real artist, yeah, getting one at a high quality is a minimum of $500 and more often 2,000, 3,000 if you want really good detail. And here, if we can generate those for a fraction of that price, that's still creating 90% of that feeling, that's incredible. Like that's a game dev lifesaver.
And I mean, as I say,
especially I think it fits as loading screens because like, obviously, basically, AI art produces a lot of errors. That's like inherent to it right now, and that's not really like using it in your actual gameplay is quite different. I can imagine then, but with loading screens, it doesn't really matter. I just need we need you to have visually look at something that represents the world while we move all the pieces around that has to happen in the back end, right? So it works for its spot, I want to say.
As a performance engineer, though, I'm actually happy that you don't have to spend very long on the load screen. I hate games that have long load screens.
I mean, the computer I was running it on is quite old. It's the newer computer I have is my work computer, and I'm not allowed to install games on it, so I have to revert to my old mid-range 7-year-old PC. But obviously since it is like the style of game for the style of game that computer works perfectly fine. So and the load times were decent enough for that one. But that was, I mean, most things take longer to load, so I think you nailed it. But speaking of that, obviously, like, I mean, if you look at the world of PC gamers, because currently you're aiming for a Steam release at this point, and I mean, if the game does well, like I suspect you will look at other platforms as well, right? Or
absolutely,
yeah.
The sky's the limit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously for me, this style of game is something that I like and generally play this style of game on. Like, if I can play it on a touchscreen, I usually do. Because I mean, preferably a bigger one like a tablet, but you can see everything properly. But I mean, it's have you been like like if you look forward, like let's say the game is released, the launch goes really well, and you start looking into other platforms. Like which platforms would be the first ones to look at that point?
So my instinct's similar to yours. I want to play it on my iPhone and Android next. That feels like a very natural home. We did our last game on Steam and iPhone and Android, and so my initial thought is mobile's in a very weird space monetization wise.
Yeah,
monetization wise, and Apple and Google keep like swapping their SDKs every like 5 months, so they can break your game. You have to like. If we program it in Windows, it's gonna work fine for 10 years, no problem. But with Apple and Android, if you don't update your game every like 5-6 months, it either won't work as well or have like new bugs because they're like, we introduced a totally new screen. This is a circle screen. Your one's designed for squares. Or they'll change their SDK and they're like, now you can't render this type of graphics. So there's some pain points to that are different. It's more of a maintenance burden. That said, as a delivery mechanism, like I love mobile. So the challenge is then what's the correct way to monetize that? Because we want to make something for our effort since it's more work in some ways.
Yeah, I totally get that.
But we also don't like the predatory pricing that most mobile games, they're not even games so much.
Yeah,
they're mostly a way to trick people out of their money, and that sucks. Like that's
the
dark side of the world that we kind of riff at in our dark satire about the future.
Yeah, I play a lot of Pokemon Unite with my kid, the 6-year-old, because he loves Pokemon, and I mean they just released a new character that I calculate like if you want to buy that character with real money, and for the first week you can only buy it with real money, it's like $25 for a single character in a mobile game. It's like
everything has gotten so fucking expensive.
Yeah, it's how do you get away with this?
Who's paying? Like, how is this working when? Yeah, I mean, Watch 2 is now charging $30 per skin on their characters. And you're like,
it's like how did we get here?
Who's paying this? Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and especially then when you have your 6-year-old going like, Dad, can you please buy this for me? I'm like, no. But please, you go with the puppy eyes. Like, it's $25 for a bloody character. No. Yeah. But yeah, so to pivot a little bit, I mean, as I said, my computer is really old, so I've been pivoting quite a lot recently towards cloud gaming. Have you guys tried cloud gaming so far?
I have not, but I've had extensive conversations on it with people.
Yeah.
One of the things about being a game developer is if you're a game developer who's any good, you have a top of the line PC. Yeah. So you don't actually want to be doing cloud gaming when you are a game developer and you've got a beefy machine.
Yeah, it's a bit of a waste of resources to.
Oh yes, it's actually slower for you. It's much slower than installing the 80 gig and cranking your settings to max is still faster than cloud gaming would be. So it's kind of one of those odd things.
Yeah, and from my standpoint, I mean, since I don't have one of those beefy PCs, cloud gaming, especially like GeForce Now, for example, I mean, it has been saving grace really for me. I mean, I was playing just like after the stream of Metroplex, I was jumping into a Plague Tale Requiem on the GeForce Now 3080 tier. I mean, it's. I mean, I was essentially having the experience of having a PC with a 3080 in it, but on a 7-year-old PC, while also streaming it to YouTube. So. Like to me, cloud has really saved me a lot, and especially also mobile. Because I mean, I don't really know how I got started with this stupid project, but for some reason I decided to try because xCloud has Xbox Cloud Gaming. They have this segment. If you go into the mobile app and you select, they have like a category which is play with touch, and it's basically around 100 and I think it's 180-ish games at this point, where you can play it with just your touchscreen. It's everything from like direct touch input, as if it was a mobile game, to on-screen controllers that work variously. Some work really good, some work horribly. There was even one game on there that didn't even have the button you needed to drive forward with your lawnmower, so that didn't get you. A game wasn't even playable at all. I think you just forgot to add it really. So like for me, like I've been playing a lot of. So I've been going through all of these games, all of the 180 games, and just testing it for like 5 minutes each, just to see how the implementation works. So do you see yourself like, as you said, The mobile market is not only a pain to monetize, but also apparently not very fun to develop for with all the SDK changing. Like would something like launching on GeForce Now or xCloud and then streaming it to phones with touch input, would that be like do you think you would prefer to have that solution, even if it initially would reach a small market?
So in some ways,
does sound pretty good, though.
I actually think cloud gaming is probably a very futuristic concept that we're going to probably have a lot more people moving towards. And to that end, like, it would be fantastic. Like, I'm actually curious to see what it would take to get our game like hosted on GeForce Now and similar. I think that so most people aren't going to want to have the burden of having to think about their own hardware. And what we've done with cloud software is we've actually like people are using web apps instead of apps. Like, that's been a massive thing that we've seen shift in 15 years of most applications were desktop apps into now everything's in the cloud. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see the same thing with video games too, especially as we reduce the latency for input delay. Like, that seems fantastic to me.
Yeah, and I'm lucky enough to live in Sweden, and Sweden is famous for surprisingly good internet connections. I think my average ping towards the NVIDIA servers is like, I think the connection to and from the NVIDIA servers when I use GeForce Now it adds like 5 milliseconds of lag, which is
wow.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even noticeable. I think on my phone it's like 25. It's not noticeable at all. So I mean, for someone like me, cloud gaming is already as good as playing locally in a lot of cases.
That's incredible.
I would jump on. Yeah, that makes a lot more.
Yeah, and I mean,
wow.
And I mean, we don't have any data caps either, so I can just play whatever I am. I just go for it. Obviously, not all of the world.
I'm envious of your internet.
I know. Right?
I mean, Stockholm, Sweden
is not as good.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stockholm, Sweden hosts. I think if 4 out of the 10 biggest ISPs in the world, I think 4 of them have their headquarters here in Stockholm. So we do have a lot of R&D going into that. We have Ericsson. They build like all of the 5G masts in the world are built the design here in Stockholm. So I suppose that has to count for something. We're not a very big country, but we do have some really fast internet. And for example, I know for a fact that for GeForce Now, all the you guys would have to do as a developer is after you launch it on Steam, you just essentially there's a checkbox to allow we opt in for GeForce Now, and then they will do some things on their end, and then reach out when they're ready to launch you essentially.
That's incredible.
So but they do. I know that they did get a link at some point to the SDK documentation for that, because I specifically asked them for it. Where they do support direct touch input as well, so it is an option you could go down in the future. So I really hope the launch goes well, so that we can get to a day where that's the reality for us, so I can play it on my phone wherever I am.
Yeah, sounds incredible.
So yeah, but obviously you've been working on this game for over 3 years now, right? What's been the biggest hurdle in making it so far?
Still the tutorial. Tutorial is the number one hurdle.
Yeah.
I think beyond that, man, we've had a whole bunch of different design problems. So it's evolved. Different parts have had different parts of the challenge. One of the challenges we ran into is making it so we could compose the heroes the way we wanted to. One of the bits we actually went too deep with is we had characters have 3 different archetypes. So they had 50% more possible cards per hero. And one of the problems that created was, so the upside is that allows power players to create, even more complex deck builds, but it actually made the skill floor much higher, where a lot of newer players would pick cards that just didn't go well together because they didn't really have in mind for what their build is supposed to be or how it's going to work together. And so they'd shoot themselves in the foot a bit. So one of the things that we did there was we moved from 3 different archetypes, which originally they weren't even composable. Every character had their 3 things, to each hero doing 2 things. And the next bit we made is we made them composable, so we can connect 2 sort of halves, and then you got to create a few new cards per hero, but you can kind of hybridize 2 different archetypes and those types of things. And that's going to serve us well, especially if we had a bunch more characters, because we can you can get a very different play style even with two characters who share one archetype. They might play totally differently than each other. So that was kind of one of the things we had to just feel out by playing, like where was it too much complexity. And one of the nice things is now you get much more focused decks. Like if you get a hero, you've got a decent chance of being able to build some kind of build that fits in your mind, and it's not as based on RNG of will you see the right archetype cards anymore.
Yeah, that's cool. So I mean, any code has runs into bugs. What's the funnest bug you've seen so far?
The funnest.
Yeah.
What a
There about to be a couple of them over the years, right?
Oh yeah, always.
As always.
Huh.
Or has there been any bugs that you've seen that you have made you go like, maybe this is maybe a feature, not a bug, or giving you an idea for a feature?
I feel like we haven't got too many features out of our bugs that I can think of. We have had a lot of bad bugs. A lot of various run enders and so forth occur because of sequencing problems with our messaging. Like, since a lot of our things don't want to communicate directly because, all the systems want to do their jobs, but they're all waiting to kind of be done. We've had sequencing bugs appear where because someone doesn't wrap up their step, like the game doesn't progress and suddenly it's in a soft locked state or...
Yeah, those are always annoying.
Yeah, a pain for sure to solve of the kind of problems. It's so interesting. It's kind of a problem that you can never have in an action game. You can only have in a turn-based sequenced game.
Yeah, that's true, because action games always keep moving no matter what.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, you're like, okay, but I need to check if there's reactions. I need to check if there's reactions on the reactions.
So here's kind of a quirky one. I don't know if there's any that turn into features, but one bug that's kind of wild is you could, in the deck builder screen, you can build your deck, and then you can click fight button, and then you can swap your deck before you get to the fight. So you can end up
funny bug.
You can end up like not bringing any cards for one hero if you slap that clear button right after fight. So you can go in with two heroes, but one deck of 12 cards so that you can always do finishers and stuff. That was a pretty quirky one. That was very sneaky.
Yeah, that's
I
so
think the
sneaky.
sneakiest one. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that sounds very sneaky. Sounds like
I think
something
the
the Spitting
funniest
Bitch would
one
use.
I saw was someone got a reaction that gave them 2 magic for every. It was supposed to be for every card they casted.
Oh
but
yes.
They could get it to work with every magic missile fired. So they just were able to because they had a reaction on something else and they were able to get it to react to the reaction. They were able to like play a magic missile and generate like thousands of magic suddenly.
Yeah, that sounds like a feature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, I think that one's still in the game right now. I think we just discovered it a couple weeks ago.
Nope.
Oh, it's fixed.
I have fixed that bug. That no longer can happen.
Beautiful.
I did.
Too bad. That sounds
track
like fun to
down
use.
why it was reacting to each of the effects and made sure.
That's
why it has a little first of check. It's like, is this the first one? Okay.
Nice.
Oh, don't react to the others. Anyway,
Oh.
it was funny because we had a
solution.
contest going on that was for the highest damage you could deal by turn 3. And the person who found that, of course, was trying to find ways to deal unfair amounts of damage.
Yeah, and then they can find all kinds of fun stuff.
Oh yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
They definitely won the competition with the variety, like the ways they were breaking the game.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So obviously you are getting close to release now, right? I saw the intended release is December. Right?
So that's true, although there might be a delay because we're actually after Steam Next Fest. We're reaching out. A publisher who wants to publish our game in China is reaching out. And
Nice.
Yeah, and if we wanted to do that, we got some of the framework for localization in, but not all of it. And also, because of the power of clicking that early access button, you want to have as much marketing momentum as possible before you hit that one. So we might be pushing it out so that we can hit a big deploy in China as well, which would be massive because that's where actually Slay the Spire went big.
Yeah.
They have a ton of players who love cerebral games and who are not afraid of intellectual games. And that means it's a really, really good fit for our type of game because You have some Americans who expect just to walk in with their controller and instantly be Super Mario and beating Bowser and spanning across the world with a button push. And then you've got our game, which if you don't think you will die, and you won't die in the same way you will in Dark Souls, but you will absolutely die if you don't know what you're doing. Like, you're gonna have a very hard time, even at the normal difficulty level in the adventure. So it's a good fit for people who are more cerebral or are happy to do more thinking. And it's not a great fit for people who are like casual or cozy gamers. This would be a terrible game for them.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also always that famous Miyamoto quote about a delayed game will eventually be good, but a bad release game will never be good, or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's true.
I agree with the sentiment, even if I don't know what the quote is.
Yeah, it's something like that. It was basically, yeah. I mean, it's better to delay a game and fix and like make sure that you release it as good as you can reasonably can. Which I remember. So like it's always good to push it if that's what's needed. But yeah, so like so you mentioned like maybe doing some work with localization, but what else is there left to do at this point?
The new story is still like, obviously there's a version of it in the game. We're tightening it up, but there's it has 2 full bosses and only one of the bosses is fully implemented. Okay. So it's got, and bosses are the 3 stages and have a bunch of stuff. So that boss has got to be finished. There might be some other more work for that adventure, obviously. But then we also have a kit or 2 that we don't like. I know as a middle of the rework, I think, of the Marks kit. So Lissa, the assassin character, has an entire kit around putting on marks on people and detonating them, but it shares a lot of similarities with stealth and how it behaves while being a little convoluted. So that whole kit's getting a rework of what it will do. Instead, it's going to be kind of more like a combo thing where it builds up marks that don't go away, but then you utilize to kill the person.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so there's some more augments we're planning on creating. So there's just a bit of stuff.
Yeah, but nothing too big. It sounds like, but still a fair bit of stuff. You it sounds like you'll be busy enough, but not overworking yourself.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think there's any massive parts that are missing, but one thing we've learned is the content. If you have trivial content, it's pretty easy to make, and if you have complex content, it's harder than you think. One would think like writing one new card should take like an hour and a half, but in actuality, it's usually tougher than that because you have to think about the implications of the way that card will interact with the enemies, the way that card will interact with the rest of its set, the way that card will interact with every possible augment that you could get. And that's where it's just, you think this will go fast. And the next thing you know, you look at the clock and it's been 3 hours. And you're like, well, I designed this one cool card. I'm going to showcase this one on Screenshot Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, if you have 250 cards, adding one more card, that's 250 possible reactions to that card. So.
Yes, you're right. So some of the parts that you think are easy are actually way, way harder than you think. That's the part I've learned. Whereas if I make a new battlefield, I can actually make a brand new battlefield in 75 minutes. Totally new space that looks beautiful. But I come to a card and the gameplay is just so deep that your brain's tied up.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, I never design a single card at a time. When I'm working on a set, I'm looking at all like 12 of its cards at the same time. Because I just need to take, like, if suddenly something fills the role of a different one, then I have to change the other one to not fulfill the same role, and they have to, and there's got to be a balance between resource expenditure versus gaining, and there's got to be a balance between the type of cards I want, and so you can't design not holistically for a character.
Totally get that.
One thing I'd love to ask you is got a couple game design feel questions. Number one, I was curious, you mentioned that you really loved Roguebook, and I also really like Roguebook. So I'd love to hear like what's hitting, what makes that one so great to you? What is it that it delivers that no other game does?
I think to me it was the fact that because the funny thing is when I jumped into Roguebook, I had like the week before played a whole lot of Slay the Spire, and just been like, right, I think I've unlocked everything that I want to at this point. I'll move on to something else now. And I just also gotten back into Magic Arena for the new set. I was feeling like I really don't want another card game right now. And then Roguebook came up on Stadia Pro, and was like, yeah, I mean, I have a stream to do planned, and I don't really know what I'm gonna play. So I was like, oh, I mean, Roguebook, it looks the most like my thing among the whole, like the 5 games I think it was that came out that month. So I was like, yeah, I'll give it a go. And then I just realized, like, it just felt so, in a lot of ways, kind of fresh with the overworld. Like the combat itself was just quite similar to Slay the Spire in a lot of ways. But it was really the overworld traveling and like the unlocking parts of the world at a time, and having a limited supply on how much you can unlock at a time. Really, like it became, and like do I engage in this battle to gain more ink to unlock more of the world? But to run the risk of, like, it was so much risk and reward in every single run, and that really intrigued me. And then I got to the end of it, and then someone in chat said, like, you know, they finished the first run before you jump to run number 2 before you like say yes or no to this game. And like I didn't manage to do it on stream, but then after the stream, a few hours later, I sat down and played a bit more and finished the run. And then it came to the embellishment screen and was like, oh, now I get it.
Now I get that whole progression tree.
Yeah, because someone said in chat, like, oh, this is the game had come out on Stadia like 2 weeks before, and they were like, oh, I've already synced it in like 35 hours. I was like, really? Like, is it that good? And then when I saw that, I was like, oh, now I get it. And then I completed my first run, and so there was obviously the progression was really appealing, but I think the thing that got me to that progression, and they really locked it down for me, was the overworld exploration, which felt really fresh, in a similar way that like how Metroplex Zero, the combat feels like the whole like only bringing 12 cards to the table, just like in Guild Wars 1. That's really what like felt fresh about the game to me, being considering I have just gone off a Roguebook at this point. Like I've been going Slay the Spire, playing that for like 20 hours, Roguebook for like 20 hours, and then just going before like finally stopped playing Roguebook a few weeks, like 2 weeks ago. Really got into Magic Arena, and then and I was like, now I'm going to jump into Metroplex, and I was like, yeah, I'm still like, the genre still keeps feeling fresh. So yeah, that's probably like they each have something they bring to the table.
That's cool. And then I guess my second question for that one, that you answered that really well about Roguebook, and yeah, the overworld is one of the totally differentiating bits in that game. That added a lot. I think even just the 2 characters and the positional mechanics are pretty interesting too. Of like, it matters who's in front or who's in back. That felt like a fresh kind of take. Yeah. It's like, I guess one of my thought is in Metroplex Zero, like, what are the parts that are hitting the most for you so far? I don't know how far you got in your run.
I think I got like halfway through, maybe, or not even halfway through. Some parts through the first adventure, and obviously the tutorial. Since I was doing it on stream, I did have some sort of like a time limit, because I also had to just like stop the stream, take the dogs out for a walk, and then go back, and then I have to like have some lunch before the kids came home. But yeah, like I think like I said, the whole like what to me feels like the whole like, let's take Guild Wars 1 and make it into a card game, which, and like, I mean, considering I love card games and Guild Wars 1 is my favorite game of all time, that was just like yes. Yeah, I think I have like 3,000 hours at this point in Guild Wars 1. It's one of those games that I just keep going, like, every now and then. I mean, it's 17 years old at this point, and I'm just I was sitting earlier today, was like, oh, it's out on GeForce Now again. Maybe I should, but only the Steam copy, and I don't have the Steam. Maybe I should buy it again on Steam just to be able to play on my like, I have a Surface Pro that like an old, I think it's a Surface Pro 4. So it's quite old, but it works really well for cloud gaming. So I was like, maybe I can like repurpose that, and like, because obviously Guild Wars 1 works kind of well with touchscreen if you just tweak the UI a bit. And you can tweak the UI in the UI settings, so maybe I can. But now I'm thinking like, I want to buy the Steam copy again. Like I'm this close to spending $20 on a game that I have bought way before. I've played it 3,000 hours, but like spending $20 again on it just to be able to play it on a tablet, or maybe even on my phone if I can manage to get that get the UI right.
Honestly, if a game's giving you at least 100 hours of good gameplay, you could throw all the money at it. And you'll never be disappointed. Like it's a winner.
Exactly. And I mean, I think I bought all the expansions. I bought several mercenary slots, several character slots over the years.
Did you play all the different classes, or do you have like a favorite class?
I played all of them, but my favorite, like, there are a few builds that I really fell in love with. Like the 55 HP monk is one of the Ingo's one is one of those. It's iconic. But I mean, but I think the most fun I had in Guild Wars 1 was actually doing running for a while, where essentially, I had my ranger and a dual spec into warrior, and then had some like just movement skills to make sure that I couldn't get knocked down, that I couldn't get slowed down, and just ran past everything. And then I would just let people pay me in-game money to take them from one town to the next, when they I want to go to get to this town because that's where I can get this armor set that I really want, but I don't want to play myself there. Or there's a brand new character, so they would just pay me like a certain amount, and I would just sit there for like 45 minutes and just speed through the maps. Yeah, my ranger is my main and will be and has been. Like when I started Guild Wars 2, I was like, I gotta make another ranger. The ranger is my thing in Guild Wars. But I've played all of the classes at this point, and I do love all of them. So.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I gotta say, like, also the whole dual class system that they have, where you can you have your main, but you can switch to whatever secondary you want at any time. It also it reminds me a bit of the mechanic of having your party in Metroplex as well, having different party members playing together.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, that was one of my favorite features in D&D 3rd edition, was the fact that you could multi-class, and I love building multi-class builds. For some reason, those just felt a lot more fun and more personalized than just going with a single class all the way up to whatever level. When you multi-class, you get to kind of customize and bring out the best of both. Yeah,
and I mean, in a game like Guild Wars 1, obviously each class has around, I think it's around 200, 300 skills that when they got done with creating new content for the game. Let's say you have around 300 skills, 200 skills for each class. So you have your main class, and you also then have the 200 skills for that class. But then, since in between every zone you go into, you can respec into any other secondary class, meaning you have so you have your 200 skills, and then you can pick 200 from any other skill class. So and then from that, so you basically have a pool of 400 skills. You can switch 200 of them whenever you want to anything else. Then you can just build your slot of 8. That's what you have. You go out, and then you obviously have to combine that with your companions, and especially if you played using the hero system, where you have customizable AI characters that follow you around. You can then build up their skill bars as well, and it's the same thing, but you then have to think about the whole party. Right, we're gonna be 8 characters with 8 skills each. How is this gonna work? How are we gonna make sure we're prepared for any situation that we come across? So yeah, the strategic depth of that, you really managed to capture in Metroplex, which is what has me most excited about the game.
What was your favorite card so far in Metroplex Zero?
I would probably say it's the I think the when I got the what's the name of the robot, the fire mage robot,
FL13.
Yeah, I did unlock a card from him, which an AOE attack that scaled with his the amount of energy he had. So I just
flaming pillar.
Yeah, so I was combining that with just first having shield on Victoria, what's her name, right? I think it is.
Yeah, yes, Victoria.
So yes, Victoria's tank taunting and soaking damage and doing pulling up massive shields. But the robot just builds up energy, and then you see a flaming pillar, boom. That felt really satisfying. But I feel at the same time
strategy.
Yeah, but at the same time I feel like I've only scratched the surface so far, so it's gonna be fun to dive in deeper.
In one of our early builds, back when we had the 3 characters, we hadn't quite balanced the math for AOEs. So the guy who came before FL13 was called Andy. He's this he looks like this barbarian. He's shirtless and he's got these red tattoos. And anyway, one of the best builds for him was you just build up energy and nuke everybody with X-Costers. That was like the build in like 2 versions of the game until he realized it was just too strong.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that
funny
version
enough,
of the build was just you didn't even tank. You were just like, no, he's so effective at doing this thing that he does that you just do nothing except click the gain energy, gain energy, gain energy. And we're like, this is not good gameplay. And also there wasn't anyone countering it yet. There wasn't enemies that like knew how to deal with it. So he would just it was just an unstoppable version. Since then, now there's enemies that do dodges and drain your resources or there's like a variety of tools that various enemies have to deal with almost every strategy.
I realized quite quickly, like I had I think the battle before I got that card, I was trying to use Victoria to like build up a massive shield, and then she has a attack when you deal the damage equal to the amount of shield you have, and then you have your shield. The answer was I was like mainly getting my shield through the skill that also gives taunt. So I was like, so she was soaking all the damage, which was great.
Yep.
The downside is I never had any shield to deal damage with.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that I should probably rethink my strategy here.
And that's the kind of strategic option I love. If you're tanking and using shields to tank, then you cannot use them offensively.
Yeah.
And if you're not tanking, you can use them offensively. So it creates a really interesting either-or scenario.
Yeah, but eventually I managed.
And it also
to get
really
that
depends
battle.
on the enemy composition, because sometimes you can get away and build up shields that way because of the people you're dealing with.
Yeah, interesting question then. Do the enemies that you face, do they all use skills that that some character that you can unlock at some point can also have, or is it like do they have their own cards?
They do have their own cards because we wanted them to have their own playing patterns. But everything they use, like every single thing that's on their cards, except the way that their version of stun works, is something you can do. The only difference is, of course, enemies, when you stun them, they like lose card plays, whereas stun for your characters basically means that character can't be used, but you get just as many plays. So other than stun, you do the same, then it's the same kind of way both ways.
Yeah.
Because you can do everything they can do.
But I mean, that also really works. Again, coming back to Guild Wars 1, one of the things that they did really cleverly, because they have the problem with having so many skills that, or spell cards in this case, was that the enemies you faced, they were using the same strategies that you could use. So you could you face someone, they defeat you, and you're like, but they did this tactic. That's a clever idea, and then you can go run with it. And I feel like even though they don't have the same cards, they, as you say, they have the same for the most part.
Pool of concepts. Yeah, same keywords.
So you can still learn from the keyword from your. Which is good implementation.
One of my dreams, if this is a successful enough launch, I'd love to have a multiplayer mode where you can PvP your friends. You'll both bring in your own party configuration with a certain amount of Metro creds you spent on your cards, and then you can duel. Like, that's my dream. So we built this. It's not a multiplayer game, but we built with a balance engine that probably should work very strong for multiplayer without a lot of hitches. We built with that level of kind of balance thinking. So.
Yeah, another thing that would be
fantastic in the math. This guy's got spreadsheets on spreadsheets to ensure that everything's got the exact multiples. So it's deep, it's rich, and it's well thought through, which I love. Nice.
I really find that.
No, so good.
I was gonna say that other developers, I've played a lot of games, and they kind of just balance per card, which I don't think really makes a lot of sense generally. Like, they'll just decide what value cards seem like they should be, or that a card's too powerful, and I guess I really think that the way to go about it is to build systematic balancing. So if you decide at any point some concept is too strong, you can nerf it across the board, which is what happened with AoEs. All we did to fix AoEs was we changed a 1.5 in our spreadsheet to 1.8, and every AoE was updated. All the AoEs, were now fair.
That's really clever.
I really think that's a good way to balance a lot of times, because then it just lets you it lets you systematically fix problems if something is dominant or too weak or something.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned multiplayer. I can also see co-op being quite interesting. Instead
That
of
would be
controlling,
interesting.
like, so instead of controlling several characters at the same time, you control maybe one or two, and then you have your friend controlling the others, and then you can. I mean,
Play
I remember
like 2 cards or something. It'd be
Yeah,
interesting.
I remember playing a lot of, like, back in the day of Magic the Gathering Duels of the Planeswalkers 2014. They had the two-headed giant game multiplayer game mode so me and 3 friends would get together. We would play team up in teams of 2 and then play two-headed giant, which was really fun. So that's hopefully it's something that can be explored down the line.
Another dream feature that I want to build, because I feel like players building content is basically the best thing you can do for most games that you build, is I really want, and I hope we can release with it, but you never know with the amount of work, but I really want it so that way players can go ahead and invent their own archetypes, sets, characters.
So some sort of mod
and then just
then.
export and import them to each other.
Yeah,
it'd be really cool if that's through the workshop, so people could just be like, yeah, I built a new archetype that I thought was cool, and I'm just releasing it, and people could then,
Yeah, and I mean, if it is overpowered, then sure, fine.
It doesn't matter.
Single player.
Single player.
Awesome. It's fine.
Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree. That would be really cool. So yeah, I was just gonna ask, like, obviously the game is quite soon done. Like, how will you celebrate the release, and then, like, what comes next?
How we celebrate? We'll probably literally throw some kind of party. That's
Crazy
what we did
party.
last time. Yeah.
maybe like a week long after this 3 years of development.
Yeah,
we're gonna do a
week-long
week-long
party.
Last time
I
we
don't
just
know.
did a full day party, that was a good time.
barbecue,
was a
lots of
good
drinking.
It was a good time. We do a lot of board gaming, like you're planning on doing, and drinking sometimes, and we eat good foods. It's all fun.
Yeah.
So we'll for sure throw a party.
Yeah, that sounds good.
But other than
board
the
game party,
party,
there we have it.
We actually kind of have a mini ritual where after every Dev Crunch weekend, we go out to celebrate. We'll go out to a restaurant with some family and friends. So we typically do 2 hardcore Dev Crunches every month where we work for like 48 hours nonstop. And then afterwards, we'll go out and celebrate with a nice juicy steak or something fantastic. Just, to kind of reward ourselves for putting in that hard work. So we'll be doing that this next Sunday too, because starting tomorrow night, we do another Crunch weekend. So.
Yep.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan. And but like after release, what are your plans for, like, post release content?
Next game. I mean, after hypothetically, then the game's gotta be built. At least that's how I feel. I want to build an air game.
Yeah, Noah's got 2 ideas in his hopper that he's like,
I got a third one actually now. I'm just all playing with them in my head, but.
Tell them all of them. Why not?
Sure, why not? They're not in the same genre at all, because I'm a crazy person. Just like the last one. Yeah, you know how it goes. So one concept I have is I really like. So one element that I really think hasn't been explored as much is So if you go play Path of Exile, which I think has a lot of problems, but one of the coolest things they did is they took it so you built your skills by combining elements of them together. You made it so it spawned this thing that fires the spell and so forth. I really want to go build an action game with the premise that you're an AI, right? So you wake up as a hacker AI that breaks through ice and stuff. And the way that you will build out your abilities, which is action fighting, it's an action game in the same kind of way that Hades is or whatever, but instead you construct your skills with, like, delivery systems and various payloads or chains. And so you instead build it by running functions together.
Yeah, so some games have crafting systems. This would instead be like you craft your spells or skills.
Yeah, I think it'd be a really fun way to do the roguelike.
It gives me vibes of the co-op, massively hysterical co-op game Magica 2 that came out years ago.
Magica? I don't think I know that one.
It's I think it was published by Paradox and developed by Arrowhead Studios. Both 2 Swedish companies, and they built so essentially you could play up 1 to 4 players in co-op, so either solo or up to 4 player co-op, and it was essentially like friendly fire was always on, and you were in real time, like you had like 5 slots, so you can combine, like, you had 8 elements, 5 slots, so you can combine these 8 elements in any case. Like you can either go just 5 fire spell elements, and that would just be a spray of fire, or you could go like 1 arcane, which was in some sort of magical beam, and then add fire to that, and then we would have a fire beam, or you could go rock and fire, combine that into a fireball, and like and then you could of course combine water and fire, which would then turn those 2 elements into steam instead. Then you can have steam and lightning, and that would like the steam and water would make someone wet, and then that would trigger even more lightning damage, and like it was crazy, especially if you played co-op.
I like that.
Especially if you play co-op with friendly fire, because then reviving a friend was really easy. It was just like a 2 spell combination. You could do it in like a millisecond, and like whenever you found loot, they could be really, really good and really cool. But as soon as you died, you dropped the loot on the spot. So what would often happen is someone found like a really cool piece of loot, and then the friend would be like, "Yeah, I want that, so I'm gonna kill you now and take it." And then they you stop playing the game, you just stand there killing each other for like 15 minutes, and then you go like, "Yeah, okay, fine, you have it, so we can move on." Yeah, and it's like great sense of humor as well, and like they have a pretend language where I think they start with the first scene is basically a couple of mages are sent out into the world for some quest, and then the rest of them is having they're going away party, they're celebrating the fact that they are leaving, and then you come into the room and they go like, oh, it's totally a goodbye party, to celebrate to say goodbye, totally, and then the voiceover goes like, "Blind dog, we bury a dunk raiden," which is like some sort of pretend Swedish thing. Like it's not Swedish, but it's not English. It's somewhere in between, but none of the sort. Yeah, it's great fun.
That is fun.
Yeah, like a really fun game. It reminds me a lot of that. The concept, and that was a concept that worked really well. And then that after 2 games of Magic, I haven't really seen it anywhere. So looking forward to seeing what you can make with that.
Yeah, I think the 2 things I'll know if I've made it successfully is 1. The abilities I'm seeing players use, I didn't think of at all. If they construct things that are outside of what I thought of. And 2, I really want, because I'm in this program space, that it's, that your simulation, I really want the 2 things of 1, the base systems are in question too. So how you move might be changed based on how you went. So you don't even move like with WASD maybe you teleport between the map around at nodes that you invented. Like I don't know, but I really think that even the base things can be questioned based on what you're doing.
Yeah,
and I want the ice that's going against you to be in the same way, that kind of abstract enemy where they might not interact with you plain and simple like you expect, which means I'm gonna have it so there's a lot. It's not like spam enemies like a lot of the games do. I really want to do that more like whatever you're dealing with currently, the enemy you're dealing with is kind of like their own elite. They're good at something that you're working around. So even though you're fighting them, it's still a little bit like, okay, how do I work with this enemy?
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I just love hearing your mind work. So yeah, like it seems like you have some really cool, crazy ideas. But like let's say the release is a big success. Like, are you thinking you were gonna delve into some DLC or expansions, or is it just we're
guaranteed? If we go big success, we are for sure gonna drop some more characters, some more augments, and at least another adventure. Like we got to.
Yeah,
for sure.
So, but you're not done with this.
We just don't know if building it would be worth our, right now we don't know how big our game is going to be. So maybe we release it now and maybe people really like it, or maybe it's okay. People enjoy the time, but there's not like the kind of game where you're like, oh, let me consume some more if you had more. But if people are liking it, we talked about it. Like we would for sure want to build more bosses and more characters. It's awesome.
This is definitely kind of my dream game and my dream game engine. So honestly, if this is a big enough success, the sky's the limit. We can build new games with the same engine. We can build tons more content, either as a sequel or as DLC. Like the sky's the limit. one good thing I'm loving is that there's some players who are super hooked on what we have, even in the early access version. We got some players who've put over 30 hours in because they love the replayability and all the depth.
Yeah,
and then we got
and I get that.
Some players will lose like in the first hour. They're like, "This is too complex," or "I didn't get it yet."
Yeah, I mean,
so
card games in general is sort of a niche. It's a niche after all. Like, it's not for everyone.
For sure.
So that's bound to happen. But yeah, like I feel like you really struck gold with the complexity, I think. So,
yeah, and honestly, I'm still
it's...
hyped by it. So my only thing is I don't want to make stuff that nobody will end up playing. But if we got a passionate fan base, like the sky is the limit. This game is great. We've got 8 big mega corporations, and we've got core stories for 3 of them. But I'd love to do at least 1 story for each, and maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah, and then you could also end up with some roguelike endless mode to wrap it all up with.
I am very weary of endless mode. There's a good blog post that basically is like how endless mode killed my game. Like that's the title of it. But like,
yeah, so maybe then when you feel done with the game, you're like, we don't want to work on this anymore. Let's release endless mode and then get game.
That's endless mode is a danger because players, as a developer, you have to design constantly for players not to ruin their own fun.
Yes.
You must work to stop players because players, if given the opportunity, will ruin their own fun. One of the ways we noticed this is players, if they found a good build that was like they could consistently go for it, rather than exploring and having fun, some players would choose to ruin their own fun and try to just play the same build, like because it worked in the past. But obviously, that's not as fun way to consume the game. Obviously, but players can't help themselves to a degree. So you have to make it so that way there's inconsistency. So they can't consistently do that. They need to play to what's coming up, and then players will do like so. So one of the things Endless does is Endless can make someone burn out on a game much faster than if they played runs over and over with variants, because they're playing the same characters too much, the same thing they built too much. Yeah, so that's why I'm weary of Endless.
That's arguments that I hadn't even thought of, but now that I hear them, it's like, yeah, that makes so much sense. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember which game it was. It was a different roguelike that basically said we should never have made Endless, but I don't remember which one it was that said it, because they're like, we saw what players did after Endless existed.
Yeah, so curious then, how much analytics do you get from when people play the game right now? Like, do you have some hooks in to send like data of which cards people play, or
yes, we have purely anonymous data, but we track all kinds of stuff. So we track how far they, especially this was helpful during Steam Next Fest, is how far were people making it through the tutorial before they quit. Were they making it all the way to the main screen, or were they quitting like halfway through or whatever? We actually found a bug through that, which is pretty nice. But then when the high value analytics after that are, what cards are people picking? What are they playing in their deck? Which enemies are hurting people the most? Which heroes have the highest win rates? Which cards have the highest win rates? Which cards do people like, but they'll make them lose? Like if they put that in their deck, they will lose. So we've got a whole bunch of things, and we're actually looking for the big outliers. Where is something like too strong? Or where is it ruining people and they didn't know? Like they're like, I always pick this card and then I lose my run. So we're trying to fix that, and like, why did they lose? Like, was it because of this card? Was it because of the rest of the build? So yeah, we're looking into those. Also, like, are there cards that nobody's picking? Like if we present 3 options and nobody ever picks a given card, why didn't they pick it? Did it seem too weak? Was it too complicated? Did it not fit the build? So we want to have everything be a live option. In a lot of CCGs, there's cards that are just worse than other cards. You know this in Magic. Like there's commons and uncommons that you only play in limited. But what we'd like is every card to be pickable in some builds, some scenarios, even the ones that are. We also wanted, so we ran into a scenario. We've changed the way we presented things a whole bunch of times. We noticed that in some versions, if you got a much higher rarity card in a pack, you'd almost always pick the higher rarity card. And so we tuned the RNG a lot so that there's less divergence with that and less like, oh, well, I'm not even gonna think about this common because here's an epic. So with a pick 3 currently, you get the same rarity. So the odds are still the same of you getting a good thing, but then if you get a rare, you get to pick between 3 different rares as opposed to between a rare and a common, which is a stupid choice. Instead, you're picking between which common do I like, which rare do I like. And that helped a ton. Now, those are all live choices. So that's the interesting thing for me is I want every choice that people are making not to be a no-brainer. I want people to bring on their brains every moment in the game. And I want them to feel rewarded, like when they make a good pick. And I want them when they lose, they're like, I could have done this differently. I want them to think, how will I play my next run differently?
Yeah, and realize like, this is where this is the point where I realized I fucked up.
Exactly.
Yes. I've had those moments, like I was versus the rocket launcher missile thing, and it builds up its armor and resistance over time until it does a giant blast. And I stupidly like had done a thing. I was like, I'll just keep them stunned and then they won't be able to do their blast and then I'll kill them eventually. And then I realized if they never do their blast, they never remove their armor resistance. And I had no way to kill them unless I let them do their thing. And I had no way to dodge their thing. I mean, they were going to kill my entire party and I had ruined it and I was dead because I didn't bring any tools to actually deal with the fact that the enemy and the fact that I'd chosen to stall rather than try to kill them outright before they got charged up. I was like, when I realized, I was like, I've ruined my run.
Yeah, we've all been there. I think it's at some point. So, have you guys decided on the price point yet for the game?
No.
I'm thinking it's probably going to be $24.99 US. That's what it looks like.
This is the first time I've heard this number, so you know.
Yeah, well,
you're hearing it first time too.
Last year it would have been $19.99, but in America, inflation means the dollars are worth about 30% less than they were a year ago. So we're still trying to price it at that indie price point, but an indie price point for 2023 and not 2019.
So then I think I have maybe just one question left really, and it's more of a like one of those hypotheticals. And again, going back to cloud gaming because it's my main niche at the moment. But like obviously with cloud gaming, it opens a couple of doors for developers on like things that weren't really possible before. You know, I mean, you don't really have to worry about things like storage size or I think it was wasn't it Microsoft that had I think it was Knockdown 3 or whatever it's called, where you had the like they uploaded the physics to the cloud, or Microsoft Flight Simulator, which runs like uses weather data from the cloud to and like renders in environments from like Bing Maps or whatever I think they're using. Like given all of the opportunities like that, like if you were to make like, would you find it like a fun project to do something for like doing a cloud native thing? That's something that could only like can you think of something that could only work in the cloud that you've been like dreaming about maybe doing one day when technology, like if technology reaches this point, or if I didn't have to worry about this thing that through cloud compute you could bypass? Like, do you have anything?
I feel like honestly, we'd have to be less indie than we are to for me, but that's because I'm not trying to. I don't have the resources to build the game that would require the resources.
Let's say you did
to consume it. Like it's funny. We'd have to be a lot bigger. It feels like to go after that space.
Yeah, I suppose you do. I think you have to be. Like
I think for me, the one thing that I'd love to do in the cloud is actually instead of having Steam Workshop for mods. How cool it'd be if people were building their custom characters and custom enemies and custom maps and custom cards, but they were all shared in the cloud. So you could like upvote those and play them right away. Like that seems like a fantastic cloud offering of you can try Bjorn's new 55 HP monk in Metroplex Zero right now because that's the build of the week.
Yeah, I saved it 5 minutes ago. It's now available for everyone. Yeah.
There we go. That would be a fantastic usage of cloud in our game. For down the road, like, man, there's a ton. One thing I'm excited about is procedural animation. That's something that's very, very compute costly, but I would love it if rather than having to pay your animators, you know, $10,000 to make your boss do all the moves they want, if there was a way to use physics simulations to figure out for this shape of creature, how will he move? And even custom creatures, how would this custom creature that nobody's ever seen before even designed, like procedurally generated characters, how would they
and I've actually seen that Embark Studios, Stockholm-based studio, have I think 2 games announced coming soon. I think they're mainly a lot of people coming from specifically DICE, Then they created this new studio. It's headed by the guy who used to be like spearheading all of EA for quite a while. Like the Battlefield founder. They're actually doing that right now. Like there is, I think they have some sort of research paper out online on like how they use machine learning to generate animations for the creature. So that is already in. Like and I remember seeing that like a year ago, and then I saw the first trailer when they released the first trailer. Like that robot was in that animation demo. And I can see the moves that they showed in that thing, and they're also doing things with like photogrammetry. So you take obviously take 10,000 pictures or something, and then it's like a 2-week process of building a 3D model out of those pictures. They've made it a machine learning tool that basically does all of that in 15 minutes automatically. So they just take all of the data photogrammetry data, put it in a folder, and just click a button, and then 15 minutes later they have a fully working asset.
So cool.
So Embark Studios is doing some really cool stuff. I hope their game does well, so they can keep doing fun stuff. They seem to have some crazy things going on. I think there was even one. I ran into a talk from one of their developers who was building like basically a small like content creation bot. So like if she placed down 2 trees and a rock in between them, then they would do something similar. Not copy it, but do something similar somewhere else on the map. And then it was like she built a third of it, and then the bot did the rest of it in the same style, but still uniquely. Really like interesting concept.
That sounds amazing.
That is cool. I like that idea.
So machine learning in game development seems to be doing some fun things in the coming years.
I agree.
So looking forward to see what you guys can come up with when those become tools available to you. I'm sure they will at some point, quite before long.
Oh yeah.
So really looking forward to the release and everything, and finding time to play through it all. Hopefully, I'll be able to do that. You never know with the kids and life in general. But yeah, I really like what you've done so far with the game, and I'm looking forward to see how the launch goes. Best of luck to you with the launch, and I hope to see more from you guys in the future. So.
That sounds fantastic.
Thank you.
All I had,
thanks so much for having us on. It's been a fantastic show, just exploring the space and talking about some of our favorite games. It's been amazing.
Yeah, I look forward to talking to you. It will be fun to talk more in the future, maybe post-launch, and see how things has progressed.
I'm absolutely up for that.
So yeah, thank you so much, and I'll see you around.
Have a good night.
See you around.